Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Community Development, Housing, and General Government meeting for December the 14th, 2021, last one of the year. Due to the pandemic, all committee members are participating virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. When there is a vote, it will be necessary to take a roll call vote. Committee member will be recognized, raise their hand, and state their vote. Committee members are Councilmember Annette Scipio, Vice Chair, Councilmember Robert Clark, and Councilmember Kevin Monday. And yours truly, Denise Adams, Chair. There will be no second City Council meeting in December. All committee items will be considered by the Mayor and City Council at the January 3rd City Council meeting. On our general agenda, we have 4 consent items and we have 6 general agenda items. At this time, I will ask, are there any items from the consent that the committee or council would like to be pulled for further questions or discussions?
C3.
Okay, any others? May I have a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda?
Move approval of the balance, Clark.
Second, Scipio.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Clark and Councilmember Scipio. City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes.
Councilmember Mundy.
Aye.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Yes. City Clerk, would you call up item, read off C3?
Item C3, ordinance designating certain property as a local historic landmark, Shipley Building.
And Chris Murphy and Michelle McCullough will be discussing this. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Michelle will actually begin with a brief presentation and just provide you a recap. And then if we need to get into more questions, we can try to answer those.
Thank you.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm trying to share my screen, but it says I am disabled. There you go. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Alrighty. Can everybody see that? Somebody give me a head nod. Okay, great. Alrighty, tonight we're gonna, I'm gonna bring to you local historic landmark designation for the Shipley Building, which is at 609 North Liberty Street. The applicant is the Famed Properties LLC Group. Again, the site is at 609 North Liberty. The tax block and lot and pin are on the screen. It's about 0.09 acres. They are requesting the entire exterior, interior of the Shipley Building. For that in a minute, that the local significance in examining the research that was submitted, that it did not demonstrate that this building meets the criteria for special local significance. The building was seen as just a representative example of early 20th century architecture in downtown Winston-Salem, and was not found to make a significant contribution to the broad patterns of the city's history. Mr. Shipley, the building's namesake's contributions to the city were of a standard of a successful businessman in the 1920s and 30s, which was the era of success for Winston-Salem. You really had to stand out to be of special significance in Winston-Salem during the 20s and 30s. The building is not exceptional or special architecturally in that it was not found to be a work of a master, possess high artistic value, represent a significant or a distinguishable entity of distinct characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction. Also, there are 7 levels of integrity. And in this case, the design and the material, even the representative of the applicant noted that design and material were not very strong in the Shipley Building's case. So for the recommendations, the staff did send it to the State Historic Preservation Office. We received their comments on August 19th of this year. The application went to the Forsyth County Historic Resource Commission. They held a public hearing on November 3rd. The applicant's representative spoke and made a presentation at that hearing. And then the HRC found unanimously that the Shipley building does not meet the criteria for designation as Winston-Salem's local historic landmark. And I will take any questions that anybody has at this time.
Councilmember Scipio. You're on mute, maybe?
I got it. I do want to recognize the important work that our commission does in determining historic properties. Just because a building is old doesn't make it a landmark designation, something that was special and unique. I just wanted to make sure that all council members understand this, because I think as the city matures, we're going to have other buildings that don't meet the strictest criteria, although they may be in a designated historic district. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. And any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Councilmember Scipio. Councilmember McIntosh, can we take the screen down, Sharon?
Oh, sorry, I will end. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Am I off of mute? I'm curious, I mean, the HRC and SHPO both recommended against designating this, and yet it's on our consent agenda. Just from a process standpoint, I'm wondering why this would be on the consent agenda, not on as a general item for us to discuss.
I will leave that to Mr. Murphy if he's on here, or Mr. King, or Ms. McCullough.
I think typically with our landmarks, it goes to the committee, prior to the public hearing. And I think typically we put it on there. And again, I think it's out of habit, probably because typically we're voting for support and, we see a reason. And so maybe because of the full agenda and that sort of thing. But again, I'm here to answer any questions. If you have any more information you need, I'd be more than happy to give that to you.
I would just like to request as a matter of course, if it's not recommended by either one of those two bodies, that it not be on a consent agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we remove the PowerPoint screen? Thank you. I'm operating in the blind here.
Oh, there's a different screen.
And now I have the meeting. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's a good synopsis of the Councilmember Scipio, the Councilmember Ward, and Councilmember McIntosh and staff. We appreciate all the work that you do. And this is not you. This is us. Councilmember Mundy, this is us. We tweaking the process now. Councilmember Mundy and then Councilmember Larson.
This is not.
And just so you all know, I got a long general agenda.
Thank you, Chair Adams. I'll make this quick. This is not about the designation, but does this in any way impact the development that's currently in process in that building? Does anyone know the answer to that?
So currently the applicant is using the state and federal historic preservation rehabilitation tax credit program, which is great. So they are getting a financial benefit through that program. From talking with the applicant, the developer, and the representative who did the report, I would probably believe that they did anticipate getting landmark designation. However, they were told from the beginning this was not a given. So, and staff had a lot of qualms even in the beginning because of the representative style of this building and such. So it is located in the downtown North District, so that is why it is able to get those tax credits. So it does get one of those program benefits.
Thank you for that.
Councilmember Larson.
My question's been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Scipio.
Yes.
I think.
Oh, I see you now,
Clark.
Councilmember Clark.
Yeah.
Councilmember Clark.
The lone Republican is ignored.
I'm not ignoring you. I just couldn't see you.
Michelle, let me re-ask the question Kevin just asked. If they apply for the federal and state historic tax credits and we do not approve this, do they get disallowed?
No.
They're two separate things.
Exactly.
pots.
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
I
yep.
would-
So they have already applied for that process. They go through the State Historic Preservation Office. Here locally, we do not have any involvement in the rehabilitation tax credit process. Remember, with our landmarks, it's that 50% tax deferral in perpetuity with the property that we're looking at with this designation. So, it's a big plus, but.
Yeah, got you.
Much discussion. May I have a motion on the item, please?
Madam Chair, I recommend that we accept the report for this designation not being acceptable as a landmark designation.
May I have a second?
Second, Monday.
The motion was moved and approved by Councilmember Scipio, Councilmember Monday. City Clerk, would you please call for the vote?
Councilmember Scipio,
Yes.
Councilmember Mundy,
Aye.
Councilmember Clark,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Yes, thank you very much. Now we will move on to the general agenda. There are a couple of items on here. Well, it's really three that have been carried over, and I've asked staff as when we move forward that items that we delay in a committee meeting, that those items automatically go to the top of the next agenda, next meeting versus being moved or pushed down to the bottom. So, City Clerk, may I have the first agenda item, please?
Item G1, information regarding adding metal detection to City Hall and Bryce A. Stewart facilities. This item was continued from the November 9th, 2021 Community Development Housing General Government Committee.
Mr. Geis. Mr. Taylor, Mr. Geis.
Right ahead, Mr. Geis.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, committee members. I will be brief in this. If I could please share my screen, I will get started and we'll get this out of the way. Okay, good evening. I'm going to be very brief on this. Where I wanted to start with this before we started exploring was just give you an estimate of what our base contract is before we start to look at expanding. Currently, we are receiving the highest level of service from our security with 4 company police officers. We estimate that contract to be about $350,000 a year. These are estimates based on our current negotiated rates as we go through the RFP process to secure permanent services for the future. So these are estimates of about $350,000 based on our rates right now. When we started out this process, we were looking for some proposed enhancements to our current systems to better provide safe and secure community for our employees. And in that, we looked at metal detection. When we go through metal detection, we started to look at communities that are similar to ours, and we realized that they are implementing them in some form or fashion, with the majority of them utilizing what is called 2-phase metal detection. So that is the industry standard. So based on 2-phase, what that means is there are 2 different types of metal detection that are rolled out. A primary, which is your phase 1, which are the walk-through metal detectors. Everybody's familiar with them who's gone through TSA. Very simple to use. You walk through, no effort on the participant other than to walk through the screening device. It will register where there are any issues, and we'll be able to do follow-up. So those primary phase 1 detectors are on casters and able to be rolled to the main entryways for this analysis. Those run a little bit more than $3,176 per unit. Phase 2 of detection would be wands or handheld devices. They provide follow-up to anybody who registers on the walkthrough units, as well as help search bags and do secondary screening for handicapped people and handicap interests as well. So with that being the phase 2 is the industry standard, this analysis rolled that into looking at 2 options at enhancing our or adding metal detection to our security umbrella. We looked at, again, they're both phase 2 options. The first one we looked at was visitors only. And in this analysis, we estimated we would only need to buy two walk-through detectors, one for either facility's main entryway. So with the estimation of only needing 2 walk-through units, one at either building, your equipment costs came in, the one-time cost about $88,850, with the majority of the cost being borne by labor. And in this analysis, we show that we would need to add an additional 3 officers to our base bid of 4 company police officers. This is based on information that officers need to be at each location specifically dedicated to the task of doing metal detection in order for it to be done correctly. Based on a little bit of leeway we have in our current processes, we estimate we'd only need to add 1 company police officer to Bryce Stewart, and it would require 2 officers at City Hall. We look at the total cost that would be to add these 3 police officers, company police officers, to do the screening would be about $235,000 a year added on to our $350,000 base contract to bring us up to $584,806 for that is for the visitor only. We also looked at doing the second option where everybody who comes into these 2 facilities are screened. Same thing, we would do 2-phase detection utilizing the wand and the walkthroughs. And this one, because of the throughput or the amount of people we estimate would be screened, we would need an additional detector at the south entrance of City Hall. Also, above the equipment costs, we would also need to invest in significantly beefing up our security and dedicating officers for all 3 locations to do screening. So as you can see, it doubled the amount of officers we needed in the prior estimate for this one, because the throughput we estimate for employees only, for visitors only, we're probably going to have between 200 and 250 screenings a day. We estimate with the employees and everybody being screened, we're going to be well over 1,000, maybe 1,200 screens a day, which is what is really driving the labor factor on increasing it to the driving cost factor on increasing the cost from $586,000 to $819,000. So it is largely driven by dedicating officers to complete this so we don't pull away from our primary tasks that are already assigned in our current base contract. I know that was very brief, but I figure your questions would be the most important part. So I will stop and open it up to any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Geis. As the committee knows, and the council, this is for information, but we are willing to allow some comments, some questions. Councilmember Clark, can we take the screen down?
No, I won't. But anyway, no, there we go. I don't go to the Stewart building much, but at the main building, there are 4 entrances, 1 on each side, and only 1 is manned with security officers. The other 3, you have to have a card to get in. The doors are locked. But if we went to screening everybody, you'd either have to do away with that and all come in either, I think you said either the south or the main entrance. And in
Yes,
which
sir.
case, do away with entering the other 2, which would be the north or the east one, and they would still be there to leave the building, but you couldn't enter through them. I'm assuming I'm reading that right.
That is correct. We would have to redirect all traffic flow to a screening point.
And I think Stewart's got the main one, but I think they got one on the east side too that I've seen people come in and out of maybe.
We would have to modify the access cards for employees to be able to accommodate this, to shut down, to make sure everybody comes through screening.
Okay. Do we have any feedback from the staff that works in the buildings if they feel uncomfortable?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Mrs.
Thank
Chairman.
you. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Scipio.
Yes, is it correct to assume that the numbers reflect full occupancy in City Hall by employees? It does not examine the possibility of having work from home for some employees, but it assumes full occupancy, doesn't it?
Yes, ma'am. We factored in numbers that were pre-COVID, and we factored them in during the summer where we have a higher throughput just to make sure it was accurate.
Okay. It seems fairly expensive for this coverage. And I know what's driving it is a couple of incidences that we have had. I'm concerned that if we're going to do this screening, that it really should be where all of our employees are, including the Johnson building, where we have a lot of employees coming through, where we had a major incident with a gun. Down in if we're going to be serious, I think we have to look across the board being serious. But it's quite expensive, and I guess there's no simpler way to do it. I don't think there's a simpler way, but I would like to think a little bit more about some of the options.
Okay.
If there are others that aren't as evasive.
Thank you. Again, this is information. We are benchmarking and investigating other municipalities in the state. Councilmember Monday.
On benchmarking, the first chart that you showed, or one of the charts you showed, had our benchmark cities. Did it indicate whether they were screening employees or visitors only? I just don't recall.
It varied depending on use. Some places had started out using the wand, some had bought it and implemented it. So it really varied by municipality.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Larson.
Do we have any idea how we're going to pay for this? Is this fundable by the federal government, or are we looking into grants for it, or what's the strategy at this point of coming up with this kind of money annually to support it when we got 80 or 90 police vacancies right now, trying to figure out how to man our departments?
Mr. Garrity.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of City Council. It would have to be funded, Councilor Larson, through the general fund. We wouldn't be using Winston police officers. We would be expanding our contract with private security, which I believe they can staff. But it would be an increase in the budget. I would point out to you, though, that about the employee issue, most of the major instances across this country, like the one in Virginia Beach, is employees or ex-employees or soon-to-be ex-employees who are your highest risk.
Thank you, Mr. Garrity. I would like to make a comment and then we'll move on, because this is information, and any questions or other concerns you have, just get them to Mr. Geis and they'll come back with a follow-up. Nobody has to tell us what the current situation and culture is in our country on gun violence or any kind of violence. And particularly if you did not sit in on the National League of Cities workshop on violence and issues with elected officials and staff. When people are not happy with government or the persons that are overseeing the actual process, there's an opportunity for them to physically act it out. I think that, again, I feel like my job is to make sure our employees are safe, and to make sure that we are safe, and to make sure the citizens are safe. But if people don't realize that, like we said, a lot of the cities, municipalities in North Carolina, they've had incidences as well, that we now have to look to trying to keep our employees safe, whether that means safe from us, safe from each other, or safe from others, okay? So Mr. Geis, thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll hear more about this as we move forward into 2022. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Yeah, sorry to hit at the end. I know this is in the world we live in 2021. I know that this type of exercise is necessary, and I think we need something like this. I do want to work on that number, though. I mean, the optics of us spending $500,000 a year on our own protection while we can't fill out the police force. And I know that's not a money issue. That's an availability. People not coming into the arena. But just let's work on that number to keep the optics as minimal as possible.
And Mr. McIntosh, we are taking all of that in, Mr. Geis, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Garrity.
Yep.
But
it costs what it costs.
I know, safety. and with the current situation of the inflation and all of what's going on, the costs are going to be high for safety. And again, I look at it more so from my perspective of the employees that work for us, knowing whether they're police, fire, sanitation, clerk, administrative, management, come to a place. And this is not like the end all be all. We will be looking as to how, like we said, we can protect everybody. Because the last thing we want to do is be able to have to report to a family or anybody that their loved one was a casualty at work. That's across the board. So thank everybody for your comments and questions. City Clerk, please call the next item.
Item G2, CityLink Business Workflow and Performance Review. This item was continued from the November 9th, 2021 Community Development Housing General Government Committee.
Ms. McLean?
Yes.
Hi.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, committee members, council members. Thank you all for allowing me an opportunity this evening to just give you a brief update on CityLink. And do I have the ability to share my screen?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Okay, so back in May of this year, we implemented our new new customer relations management system called OneView. Some of the highlights of that system does include a more improved GIS mapping for more accurate reporting. Of course, we moved from an issue-based system to a customer account-based system, which not only gives CityLink better access to historical information as it relates to service requests, it also gives our customers that same type of access. We also included, this new system includes a new, more robust chat feature, and it also allows customer access to information via our customer web portal.
Ms. McLean, you're going in and out.
I am so
you gotta
sorry.
Speak to the microphone.
I am so sorry. My laptop acts a little weird sometimes. So I'm just giving a highlight of our new system with the better GIS, account-based versus issue-based, more robust chat feature, and also better access to customer account information via our customer web portal or via our mobile app application. As it relates to what our operations and staffing look like, I know we have had some issues with performance this year, and this is just what CityLink looked like prior to any performance improvement plans. We were on a 7 to 7 weekday, 9 a.m. to 5:30 on weekends, and we were closed all holidays except Good Friday and the day after Thanksgiving. We had 25 members on staff, including 6 contact center representatives, 3 seniors, and 6 support staff. And we were still allowing all of the same contacts as we do now. That is by phone, chat, email, web application, and mobile app. Now, this flow chart, I know it looks like a lot, so I'm just going to summarize it. Basically, what this says is any method that a customer contacts us, whether it be by phone, whether it's email, live chat, or they submit a request themselves via the mobile app or the citizen web portal, that submission comes into CityLink through our system, and it goes directly to the department. If the department has an interface such as CD Plus or CityWorks, that interface interacts directly with our system OneView. CityLink does not close any requests. I wanted to make sure that all of those yellow spots you see is where the department initiated a closure, and it comes back to our system, and that's when our customers receive a communication. I think that was one of our biggest issues with customer complaints, stating that requests were being closed prior to an issue being taken care of. And so we are working very closely with a lot of our partnering departments just to ensure that that does not happen in the future. So in order to help with customer satisfaction, improve contact center performance, we came up with a performance improvement plan. And so operational hours, now we moved all of our staff, the entire staff, to Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Saturdays and Sundays were very low call volume days. We were getting maybe 200 calls on Saturday and less than 100 on Sunday. So instead of having staff to staff during those hours, we moved everybody Monday to Friday. We have our after hours handling any emergency calls. So customers are still being taken care of over the weekends. Anytime there's an event, whether it's inclement weather, a man-made event, we will revert back to 24 hours and we will be staffed as long as the event occurs. We're going to continue to staff for Good Friday and the Friday after Thanksgiving. We have added 3 temporary staff, which has been a huge improvement as far as it relates to our performance. And we are utilizing light duty. We have a lot of light duty that we're able to bring in, give them smaller jobs that take less experience to do, but it helps us to improve our customer satisfaction. We're also going to do some reorganization of duties so that we are sure that we can properly cover chat, email, and phone. This is just a brief look at where we were. I don't know if you can see it closely, but where we were as far as performance and where we are. The goal each day is to try to achieve 95%, to be able to handle at least 95% of the calls that come through the contact center. Prior to the improvement changes, as you can see, our calls handled, that's the NCH percent, was 56, 68. Since we've made changes, we are in the 90 percentile on all those days, and we continue to improve. So I know you all probably have a lot of questions for me as it relates to the business process and what we're doing. So that's all that I have for you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Adams, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Bundy.
Seems to be running in the water tonight. Thank you for that presentation, Ms. McClam, and you have been very helpful to me in the last few weeks resolving some issues, but I still have some unresolved questions that maybe you can help me and other council members understand. I know several times my constituents and citizens have gotten a notification that a particular problem has been closed, but they got no explanation. And that is oftentimes what they want. And as you have explained to me, CityLink doesn't solve the problems. You're a conduit for information, and it goes to whichever department it needs to go to. I don't know if there's a way for that department to link back to CityLink, but at the end of the day, citizens are not being told what the problem is. Sometimes they're just being told that it's been closed, it's been resolved. Any advice on that?
Yes, Councilmember Mundy. We continue to meet with our departments monthly, and we reiterate how much we rely on those comments, those notes to be put on the service request so that when customers call back in, we can intelligently communicate where their cases stand, because we rely on them to know what was done, why was it closed. A lot of times when we look in there, all we see is that the resolution the problem had been resolved, but without comments. So we will continue to work with our departments, ensure that those comments have been entered. We are getting some more improved interfaces to where those comments can come over from their work order management system into our service request system, and so that we can see those comments and report back accordingly.
Thank you. I have another question. I know that recently the Code Enforcement Department has started giving us access to reports to find out where a complaint is in the process, if you will. And that information is also made available to the CALs. Do you know if that's the plan for other departments? And if so, are we going to have one single system, or is each department going to set up their own system? Because it seems to me like we have multiple systems within each department as opposed to having one single system that goes through the entire organization.
You are correct. We do have several interfaces. However, those interfaces, the goal is for that information to match. So for whatever goes into their system should come through to our system. I did make sure that every one of the CALs had access to all of the requests, so they can see everything in every department. If they come to our OneView console, they're able to see all of that information. The reporting, if you need special reporting, we can certainly work that out for other departments. We just know that code enforcement is a heavy hitter when it comes to customers. And so I think that's why they first just focused on that report.
Thank you. And we need that for multiple departments. I would say the next one is utilities. That's where for me, the next largest volume is, and daily questions on where we are in the process. And having access to that report is very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. McClain. I'm sure we will hear more from you as we move forward into 2022.
Thank you so much.
I would expect a follow-up of some type report as to how this new process is working.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. City Clerk, please call the next item.
Item G3, information on preliminary analysis of potential sites for solar panel installation. This item was continued from the November 9th, 2021 Community Development Housing General Government Committee meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Poplawski, are you on?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members, and committee members. I am just going to give a quick overview of the preliminary analysis that we've done after being awarded some finances to install solar panels on city facilities. So we took a number of different criteria based on some assumptions about what would be important for us to consider in these installations, and started with a number of sites already with the understanding that there was adequate sun exposure at these areas, and that the solar PV systems could actually be directly connected into that facility's electric system, and by which you would be able to directly reduce the energy use of that facility. Based on the criteria, which I believe you can find in your attachment further explained, we identified the Salem Lake Marina Office and Fire Station number 3 as the top 2 options identified. I'll also note that utility sites are also generally well suited to host solar. Specifically, we looked at that 15th Street pump station, the Thomas Water Treatment Plant, and the Elledge Wastewater Treatment Plant. Those utility sites would be ideal for larger systems that would have a bigger energy impact, especially because utilities is such a large energy user within the city of Winston-Salem operations. So we could, and we're happy to consider other sites, but this is just our list, like I said, of preliminary sites that we considered. And we also want to make sure that any other sites we look at do have that minimum amount of electric use. So we're not looking at facilities that use small amounts of energy that wouldn't really see a benefit from putting solar on them or near them. I'll also note that the utility sites could host ground-mounted solar systems, which would cost more, but then you don't have to worry about any kind of roof replacement issues that you might have to worry about with other sites. And yeah, I'll stop there and allow anyone to ask questions. I'm happy to answer, as well as happy to receive any feedback for suggestions about what other sites might want to be considered or other criteria to add in as well. So.
Thank you, Mr. Plowski. Thank you, Mr. Taylor as well. Councilmember Clark.
Two comments, and I spoke with Helen about this yesterday at Finance Committee. Number one, I do not think we should put them on roofs. You may save a few bucks, but when you got to replace the roof, it's got to be outrageous expensive to take all that stuff down and put it back up. The second is I challenged the city to think bigger than we are. I don't know how many panels can fit on City Hall, but in the scheme of global warming, it's nothing. I think we need to be looking at large ground installations, and I did talk with Aaron about this. And I've also talked with Duke Energy, and of course, they have 60, 80, 90 acre type sites. But one of the best ones that was presented was the landfill, because we've got those grassy knolls out there that would hold quite a few panels. But I would challenge, in that case, we're not looking just to offset electricity for a building. There are major power lines that go right across the landfill. You could certainly hook it into the Duke system. But if we want to make a difference, I think we need to do a larger project, and I think it needs to be ground oriented. Aaron also identified, I don't know where it is, an old landfill that had 30 or 40 acres. This was somewhere on the south side of town, I believe. So anyway, I just challenge us to think big and think long term, and that's why I say no roofs, and I think we ought to be looking at multiple acre sites if we could. Thank you.
Absolutely. And just for some quick feedback, we have considered sites like that, maybe even that same site that Mr. King has identified. And for the CIP project money that we receive for this, it is of the staff's opinion that this money would not be best suited to a project like that. However, there are options. So there is the Green Source Advantage option through Duke Energy right now, which is the best option to invest in large systems like what you, Councilmember Clark, have mentioned. Currently, I think the idea too is more suited to a community solar type project, which unfortunately Duke Energy does not currently allow in our jurisdiction. But yes, we are considering those options as well. But for this first round of funding, yes, staff assumes that through being awarded through the CIP process that we would be looking to install directly to the facilities rather than connect it back to the Duke Energy grid.
Thank you. Looking forward to hearing more from you and your department, Mr. Plowski, as we move forward and with infrastructure money coming for solar and other things. I'm sure you're going to help us to get real creative, as Councilmember Clark said. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
City Clerk, please call the next item.
Item G4, update on the city's response to COVID-19 and vaccination numbers.
Dr. Barnett. Hi there. You're on mute? No?
Okay, how about now?
Yeah.
Good.
All right, awesome. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Adams and members of the council and members of this committee. Let's see. So this information item is a follow-up to the City Council meeting on October the 18th, when this council approved the implementation of the city's COVID-19 vaccination policy. The policy became effective October 25th, and since then, the city has been able to confirm the full vaccination status of 82% of the city's workforce. This also includes about 96% of our temporary workforce that is coming to us through agencies, and there are ongoing efforts there. Effective Monday, December 6, 2021, unvaccinated employees are required to test weekly. So that did open last week, and we are currently in that process. The COVID-19 vaccination policy includes a provision of a $1,000 incentive for full-time employees and a $500 incentive for part-time employees who were fully vaccinated by December 6th. And it also includes a provision for an ongoing incentive throughout the testing period, allowing those employees who become fully vaccinated to receive half of those respective amounts. So the total cost of that incentive right now is approximately $1.8 million. And I am happy to answer any questions from this committee on where we are, but we are seeking some guidance from this council. I think there were some lingering questions at the end of the city council meeting in terms of what would be the next steps in the process, if we're doing enough or if we should be considering alternative options.
Thank you. Dr. Barnett, so you're saying that 82% of our full-time employees are vaccinated?
82% of our workforce, full-time, part-time. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and 92% of temporary?
About 96% of our temporary, third-party, and contract workers.
Okay. Councilmember Clark.
Yes, I want to preface this by saying it is my opinion that we should follow the law, and that's kind of an overriding principle that I've used throughout my entire life. My question is this, and if Ms. Carmen is on here, I'll address it to her, and that is there a requirement, and that could be a law or a presidential mandate or a governor's mandate or whatever, that we test? I was with a county commissioner last week. They are not, and this one told me they did not think there was a law that required it. And they're just like us, I would think. So if somebody can please tell me, is there a requirement to do weekly testing?
Mayor Pro Tem Adams, I'll be happy to answer that question if you like.
Thank you, Attorney Carmen.
Sure. Councilmember Clark, there is the general duty clause to protect the employer's workforce, which many cities are using as the basis for the testing program. There's also EEOC guidance and laws, that indicates that employers are allowed to do testing. The mandate, the Biden mandate, I can't really call it the Biden OSHA mandate, as you all are aware, has been challenged in various jurisdictions. And right now, most municipalities are kind of waiting to see what happens with that mandate in the legal system, but City Council certainly has the authority to have a vaccination and COVID testing policy. I mean, there's been numerous articles from EEOC or guidance from EEOC, articles about the general duty clause and so forth, that gives you basically the authority to do it if you want to do it. And obviously, the council has decided to move forward with it.
But there's a difference between having the authority to do it and being required to do it.
Right.
What I just interpreted from you is we're not required to do it now unless you take a very broad interpretation of the requirement to keep our employees safe. Right. And I would argue, and that's the case, I think you could argue maybe we have to have metal detectors at all entrances to keep our employees safe. But I am concerned, and we'll see how this comes, that the requirement to test may create a lot of tension. And if we're doing it simply because we want to, I have concerns with that. We're up to 82%. I think we incentivize people to get tested. But what do we do if people refuse to get tested? And that's 18% of the workforce.
The policy that was adopted in October provides for a progressive disciplinary process during that 4-week period in which employees are required to get tested. And it starts, as I recall, with a written reprimand. So there is a process already in place in the resolution that was adopted.
Yeah, but I'm concerned. I mean, in the paper today was an article that a lot of hospital chains are now dropping the requirement to be vaccinated because they can't get enough workers. And I am concerned that that requirement could create a lot of tension with the employees and maybe some tough decisions we have to make. So if it's not required, I have a concern that we're doing it, and I'll just express that publicly.
And I certainly understand that. But again, I think there's a good argument that under the general duty clause, the employer should be doing it. Now, do you want me to provide you something in black and white that says, yes, you have to do this? The only thing out there right now is the Biden OSHA mandate, which you know is being challenged.
Yep.
And
But that requirement's been in place for years, I would think, that we're supposed to keep employees safe.
Oh, yeah, I understand, but we haven't had COVID for years.
We're only doing it for 4 weeks. Again, if we take that seriously, we should have had metal detectors 20 years ago, and we should have been testing since February of 2020. And there's lots of other types of things we could do to keep the employees safe. But what do we do if 18% of our workforce refuse to get tested and
Well, that's something we'll work on, city manager, going forward. This is just an updated information. We're not going to solve anything right now. All we asked for was the update. Dr. Barnett, city attorney, has done just that. Are we in agreement?
I just want my opinion on the record that if we're not required to test, I think we need to be very careful here.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Clark, I think you made that for the record in October as well, and we appreciate you and thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Barnett. Thank you, Attorney Carmen. City Clerk, please call the next item. What's
Mayor
that?
Pro Tem Adams?
Oh, Councilmember Monday. Councilmember
Thank you. I was
Monday.
just going to make a counter argument that the 82% of people who have been vaccinated, it's very unfair for them to continue to bring people who are in all likelihood being exposed on a regular basis to that virus. And again, I'm listening closely to Dr. Ohl and to our own health department, as well as health departments in England and India, where the Omicron variant is really taking a strong hold. And they continue to say people of science, not business people who run a manufacturing organization, but people of science are saying that if we don't get 100% vaccination, we'll never eradicate this. So we can do what's good for, a small percentage of the population, or we can do what's best for the entire world. That's my opinion. So it's on record now. Thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk, next item, please.
Item G5, ordinance amending Chapter 5, 6, and 11 of the Unified Development Ordinances to revise provision regarding dwelling accessories.
This is one of these items that's been around about like the sign ordinance, the tree ordinance. It's one of those things, but it has the potential to be far more reaching. Mr. Murphy or Ms. Crum? Ms. Crum, I have you that's going to tee this up.
All right. If I can be allowed to share my screen. All righty. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the committee and council. I'm here to talk to you about UDO CC 15, which is a request to amend chapters 5, 6, and 11 related to accessory dwelling units, both attached and detached. Accessory dwelling units, otherwise known as ADUs, are small secondary dwelling units on the same lot as a principal structure with similar amenities as a standard house. They have been allowed in the UDO since as early as 1930, but were subject to occupancy requirements. Prior to 2017, an attached ADU required a staff approval and a detached ADU required a Board of Adjustment approval. In September 2017, City Council adopted a version of the ordinance that pretty much retained all the existing ADU regulations except for the occupancy requirements, but changed the approval process to a special use district rezoning, which required elected body approval. Since then, 2 ADUs have been approved. About last year, City Council asked staff to research best management practices for ADUs. As you may recall, staff presented this information at your April meeting. Based off the information presented, staff was asked to review and propose amendments to the current provisions to better meet our housing goals and to fall in line with our peer communities. Staff reviewed our provisions against those of our peer communities and determined that our provisions are not in line or in keeping with those communities. Therefore, we're proposing an amendment that would, one, simplify the ordinance, and two, bring the provisions in line with our peers. We're also recommending minor revisions to the definitions of dwelling unit and then accessory dwelling unit and section 5.3.1 of the UDO. To discuss some key provisions of the amendment, first and foremost would be the approval process. We are recommending changing to a permitted with conditions process, whereby we remove the elected body review. Essentially, a property owner would be approved an ADU by zoning staff if the conditions of the ordinance are met. We also recommend adding a principal use statement, basically stating specifically that a single family dwelling is the principal use for the ADU. We recommend removing the parking provision, and this is based off best management practices. Also changing the setback requirements specifically for a new detached ADU to be 5 feet from side to rear, and that no ADU should be placed in front of the front facade of the principal structure. We recommend changing the size requirement or size limit for a detached ADU to be 70% of the total floor area of the principal with a 1,000 square foot maximum. No matter the square foot of the principal, 576 square foot ADU would be permitted. We're proposing adding height limits for attached to be no more than the principal structure, and then for detached to be 25 foot maximum. And then some other changes would be the adding of a permanence provision for a detached ADU, which basically states that an ADU must be built upon a permanent foundation. This is the attached attachment A, which should be in your packet of materials. It's sort of a condensed version of that, but looking at our peer communities, the 6 peer communities that we looked at, I won't go into detail about each of these, but the main one I really want to focus on is the first one, which is approval process. All of our peer communities follow a permitted with conditions approval process for an ADU. To summarize, Legacy 2030 Comprehensive Plan promotes the use of ADUs as a way to promote infill development, age-friendly communities, and gentle density. Both the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Housing Study and Needs Assessment and the Winston-Salem Affordable Housing Coalition have identified ADUs as a means of addressing our housing needs, particularly regarding affordable housing. And the Affordable Housing Coalition has endorsed this amendment. Again, only 2 ADUs have been permitted under the current ordinance provision. Both of those have been this year. And then staff believes that the proposed provisions will bring the UDO in line with our peer communities. The City County Planning Board recommended approval at its November 10th meeting by a 5-2 vote. And with that, I will answer any questions that you all may have.
Mayor Pro Tem?
You're mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Ms. Crum. I do have a few speakers from the Housing Coalition, which, as many don't know, is part of the city's commission, many commissions. But as you've seen that they are supporting us, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to let them speak first before the committee speaks. I think that's what I'm going to do. So, Mr. Montgomery, Derwin Montgomery, are you on the meeting, the call, the Zoom? Hello?
Yes, trying to come off of mute here.
All right, we hear you.
All right, there we go. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Adams and members of the council, as well as members of this committee. As it was mentioned in the presentation by Ms. Amy Crum, the Affordable Housing Coalition has made an endorsement of this UDO amendment. We are joined with multiple members of our coalition on the call today. I see a few of those members, including Paul Norby, Paula McCoy, and Donna Woodson, are on the call, and we have other members who were unable to join in with us on today. But a few key highlights that we brought out in our unanimous endorsement of this provision was one, that as soon as the coalition was put together back in 2019, beginning work in 2020, we identified ADUs as one of the tools to begin to work on and revising the city's UDO around ADUs. And as one of the tools to be used to help reduce add to the affordability for housing in our community. Additionally, the City Council in the 2018 adoption of the Housing Needs Assessment identified within that that we needed to increase use of ADUs as an inclusion within the work that we do for providing housing in our community. But one of the big things that I think is impactful for the council to take into consideration is the dialogue and the conversation that is shifting around affordable housing and access to that. Just recently, the North Carolina Free Enterprise Foundation, whose focus is on the business environment of North Carolina, hosted its annual luncheon, and a large portion of that conversation centered around affordable housing. ADUs was a part of that dialogue and conversation. In particular, because as we have conversation around recruiting businesses to our community, what came up is that in communities like Raleigh, that they discovered that as they're recruiting hundreds and thousands of jobs to the community, they're creating one house for every 100 individuals that are moving into the community. So what does that mean? That means that it is an economic development issue for not creating enough units in our community. ADUs are not the silver bullet to end all be all when it comes to affordable housing, but we have identified it as a tool that is necessary to be a tool in the toolbox for us to address the needs. Additionally, the National Association of Home Builders, National Association of Realtors continue to encourage action to be taken at the local, state, and federal level to increase access to housing, and ADUs continue to be a part of that dialogue in that conversation. The last thing I'll say to you is that what has been clear in most research around ADUs is that where the biggest need is located, often you have the strongest pushback. And that is often from a concept of folks not understanding truly the impact that it has on communities. And for us in North Carolina, if local cities do not act to control what ADUs look like in their community, unfortunately, likely that ability will be taken away by action that happens in Raleigh, as that was also a part of the discussions that were happening at the North Carolina Free Enterprise conversation with legislatures. So again, we commend this UDO change to the committee and to the council, and encourage the council to take in consideration how you control what happens in our community, because if it takes place at the state level, as you all know, you'll get blamed for what happens without any ability to address or change the provisions of what takes place in our community. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Do any of the other coalition members want to give us a couple of minutes, like Lisa Sari, Paul Norby? Is Paul on here? Paul Norby, Mr. Norby. Anything? You see him? No? Oh, he's on? Mr. Norby? What about Lisa Sari? You here?
I'm here. Yes.
Hey.
Okay, I'm sorry. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Adams and the other council members. It's been a while since I've seen you, but it's good to see everybody and catch up on what's been going on in city government. So let me just add a couple things to, I think, the excellent comments that Derwin provided to you for the coalition. You know, ADUs are a small way and an organic way that individual homeowners can help with providing affordable housing. That's as opposed to the larger affordable housing developments that are going to go to one spot. This is a way of kind of doing scattered site affordable housing in all areas of the city. So I think that's a very important thing Another thing is ADUs provide flexible options and space for families. This provides options for retirees aging in place, for families bringing an aging parent or disabled family member close, or adult children, things like that. There was a study done in San Diego that found that the #1 reason people built an ADU on their home site was not to create an Airbnb, but to provide a space for aging parents while still allowing us a degree of privacy. ADUs also provide income and stability for households, and I think Derwin touched on that. They also allow options for people to reside in a neighborhood they may not otherwise be able to afford at a certain stage in their lives, and so provides more inclusivity in different neighborhoods in the city. They're more environmentally friendly as well because they're making use of existing infrastructure, not requiring extending infrastructure further out, making better use of materials and things like that. The average house size for a single family home in the US is 2,600 square feet. That's pretty large. And when you think about it, family sizes are getting smaller. There's more and more single person households and all that. So we've got a lot of building space that needs to be used. So ADUs provide that gentle density increase that helps neighborhoods be more walkable and allows more neighborliness in terms of supportive transportation options and other supportive arrangements such as childcare and elder care. And the last point I want to make is that there have been a couple of cities that have recently allowed ADUs around the country. Minneapolis and San Diego are two of them. And just to kind of give an idea that of people's fears that we're going to be overrun with ADUs, in the 4 years since both of those cities have allowed them, there's only been, in Minneapolis, there are 192 ADUs over 4 years. Minneapolis is a lot bigger city than Winston-Salem. That's 0.2% of all single-family houses. And San Diego, the same thing. Of course, San Diego is 1.4 million. They've had 1,400 ADUs over 4 years. That's also 0.2% of single-family homes. So it really isn't a huge overrunning of things that I would anticipate happening. And so I will finish my comments, and I appreciate the opportunity for us to speak with you.
Thank you, Mr. Norby. Good to see you. Councilmember Clark.
Thank you. I will say one of the two that came to the council this year was from the West Ward, and I will say I can remember 3 phone calls over the last 5 to 10 years. They all had to do with elderly parents, and the one that we approved the other day was an elderly parent. To me, there are 2 issues here. One are the building requirements, and that's size, shape, color, height, setbacks, whatever. The other one is the process. My concern is more with the process. And right now, we require a rezoning, $1,000 fee, and a lot of paperwork and time. What this does is simply change that process from being a rezoning to a permitting, provided you meet the conditions. And that's what I'm looking forward to and why I'm supporting it. Now, as far as the other one, that are all the requirements, I would say if somebody's got an issue with, and I'll take just an example, I think it was in there was a 25-foot maximum height on detached. If somebody's got a concern with that, I would certainly be glad to talk about it. It's not really something I've given much thought to. But my concern has always been, and Jeff McIntosh said when we put in that $1,000 fee, it was going to pretty much kill it, and it did.
It did.
And even before we did that, I remember not more than, I think the number we were given was 6 or 8 of these done in over a 20-year period or something. I mean, there just aren't many houses and lots that lend themselves to us. But I do think it is one of the answers for affordable housing. And I do think we can do it right without requiring somebody to risk $1,000. And again, as I said, if someone's got specific issues on size, shape, color, setbacks, whatever, we can certainly take those up at an appropriate time as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Mundy.
Thank you, Chair, and I apologize. I'm on my way to another meeting at 6, so I'm in the car, but hopefully there are no distracting noises. I'm very supportive of this as well. I just want to give one example of the other ADU that we approved. It was in Ardmore, it was on Hawthorne Road, and this gentleman, Terry Hicks, wanted to put his sister, who is elderly and infirm, and people who complained about traffic, it actually reduced his numbers, the number of times he had to get in his car twice a day round trip to visit her. So I think there are a lot of good reasons to support this. However, I need some help. I do have a group of residents and citizens who feel like they have unanswered questions. They have asked for one more opportunity to have a public forum where they can ask these questions. I want to make a motion that before we vote on this in full council, that we provide that. I'm not sure from a protocol standpoint how I do that.
You could make a motion, Mr. Mundy, and you're a member of the committee. You just need, is it a formal motion? Is it on the floor?
Yeah, so I would like to make a formal motion that we have one information session for the entire community between now and the time that we vote on this in full council.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Do I have a second? All right, then, Councilman Mundy, the motion dies.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you. And Councilmember Mundy, if the council, the committee and the council looked at their packet, which I know all of you did, there is just tons of information in there to review, and it's also online. Councilmember McIntosh, then Councilmember Larson.
I'm going to be really brief because I think everybody knows where I stand on this issue. I've got a long personal history with ADUs. I grew up in a house that had an ADU behind it. My first house had an ADU. I do want to talk about I want to thank staff for putting up with Mayor Pro Tem Adams and myself for beating him over the head for the last 4 or 5 years about this. This is something that we've been really passionate about. And again, my apologies for being on y'all about keeping this thing moving, but it's super important to me. I think it really solves, it's not going to solve every problem in the housing issue, but it will solve problems in housing. I've got a son right now who's trying to buy a house. If you're not in the market for a house right now, you just don't understand how bad things are. And again, this is not going to solve everything, but it does provide some relief, and it's going to provide some relief, in my opinion, where it's needed most, and that's with young people and old people. So let's move this thing along. I don't think it's going to create massive changes in our neighborhoods. So I'm all in favor, as you all know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McIntosh. Councilmember Larson.
Yes, I'd like to go back a bit to what Councilmember Clark was saying in the two aspects of process versus appearance. And certainly the process of $1,000 fee was something we imposed and could be reversed equally easily, I suppose. But what I'm concerned about is following maybe what Councilmember Montgomery said, and that is what they look like matters in the success of the program. And it appears to me that what we've got is a double standard right now between the county and the city, that we have two different guidelines. One, the county has retained most of their guidelines as far as the appearance goes, setbacks, requirements, what have you, whereas the city stripped most of those out. Could staff comment for a minute if that's not the case?
Mr. King.
I'll defer to Mr. Murphy or Ms. Crum.
Mr. Murphy or Ms. Crum.
That is a correct assessment, but again, keep in mind that whenever the change was made in 2017, that was the case as well. The county has always kept the accessory dwelling unit provisions as a special use permit for detached and a zoning permit for attached. And we have not had any direction from the county managers or the county zoning board of adjustment desiring such a change. And, looking at the provisions that have always gone to those entities, I think they take the feeling that if it's not broke, don't fix it.
I'm just kind of surprised that we have a joint planning staff and planning department, and we're having duplicating or different programs depending on what county line you're on or what city property line you're on. But that's probably not for us maybe to work about. There are some very specific items dealing with appearance and use that I would like to have some answers, and I suppose this is the place to ask those. Since I'm not on the committee, Madam Chair, can I proceed with some specific questions regarding appearance and use? Okay, first of all, could I ask, is historic district and historic designated properties included in this? In other words, the stuff that's under review by HRC currently for architectural review, are they included in this zoning, in this rezoning case? Ordinance change.
Yeah, so if you are, say, in West End and wanted to have an ADU, you would have to follow the exact same process you would for any other exterior improvements you do in the West End.
Any certificate of appropriateness? Yeah,
you would have to go through the HRC for certificate of appropriateness and meet those guidelines and get their approval. So it'd just be an extra level of review for those in a historic locally designated historic district. Now, if you're National Register, that doesn't count, but for a local designation, for a local district, yeah.
Would apply. Thank you. The question of occupancy has been a key discussion point, and it involves a lot of discussion about family members and kids returning home, and all of that seems very applicable and very, very compelling. But this is no different than what we had before. The state legislature apparently ruled that we couldn't use that as the base standard for occupancy of these buildings. We had to open it up to broader populations. And so what I'm curious about is occupancy level. Do we determine how many people can live in one of these ADUs? Is there any guidelines that what number of occupants could actually reside? I know that in the primary dwelling, we can have as many as 4 unrelated occupants living in the house at one time. What is the case for these accessory dwellings?
It would be the same as a regular dwelling unit. So it'd be a one family, which is defined as 4 unrelated individuals.
So you could have 4 additional people living in there, in the ADU, unrelated.
Yes.
Okay. Can we not control that? Is that a matter of law that limits the number of basically the same standard? I mean, it seems like these are smaller buildings for one thing, and with the generation of congestion, traffic, what have you, parking issues, such like that were related to what the occupancy level would be. Why are we not looking at that as a condition on these?
Councilmember Larson, I believe that would be somewhat self-limiting on, based on the size. With that being said, there are provisions in the ordinance related to the definition of family. So, I mean, again, we do have something in there, in there related to that. In the prior draft ordinance, I believe there was a provision that talked about limited to no more than 2 unrelated folks. But I believe, when we look at our peer cities and who we were asked to compare ourselves to, none of those other jurisdictions had that as a limiting factor on the ADU, so we did not include that as part of our proposed ordinance.
I remain deeply concerned about the congestion and the impact that this is having when you can have 4 unrelated people living in the primary house and then put 4 unrelated people living in the secondary house. And what does that mean to the neighborhood that they're occupying? I think there's a concern there, and I have deep concerns about that. In relationship to occupancy, we have anything about how these buildings can be used for B&Bs, for example, short-term rentals?
No. Councilmember Larson, I'll jump in and then I'll let Amy complete it if I'm not 100% on point. Basically, short-term rentals aren't regulated anywhere within our ordinances currently. The planning board did ask us to investigate that several years ago. We did bring forth a report to the planning board. It was planning board's opinion that we did not need to regulate short-term rentals, whether it be, we don't regulate them currently, whether it be a rental for a day, a rental for a week, a rental for a month, or a rental for a year. So it was the consensus of the planning board not to bring those regulations forward. Again, obviously, that's a council decision if that's something that council would want to be investigated in the future. But as part of the ADU ordinance, and again, as part of that previous review of our regulations, it was not viewed as something that we needed to do.
Well, we've had a lot of discussion about, family values and using these ADUs to support family values. But when we come right down to it, what happens after the first family leaves the site, that building will remain in the landscape. And its chances of it being used for a different use is very possible. And particularly if you can put 4 occupants in there at a time. I mean, I'm deeply concerned about that short-term rental issue. And that boils over to, I think, one of my biggest concerns deals with parking, and apparently our current regulation, which is a split decision, I noticed among the cities. I keep hearing that keeping peer values, that there's just no parking requirement. It seems to be pure standard. I don't think that's what your own data shows, that it's a very split opinion as to whether or not a parking space is required. You put that many family or that many people into a unit, and you create 6 or 8 additional parking spaces. Those are going to go onto the street. We already have problems picking up brush and leaves and picking up our dumpsters at the corner on the curbside, and we can't even get to them because people are parking, particularly in places like Ardmore, parking there, and you can't get it because people are parking on the street. I think you've got to provide some guidance to at least provide some off-street parking for these units, and that does not seem to be a provision that we're imposing. I don't know where these standards are being used. These are county standards that are still in place, and we've stripped out all of these questions that I've been raising on the appearance and height.
Member Larson, I apologize for interrupting you, but you have had more than 5 minutes, and this is in committee, meaning it can go to council with a recommendation, with a vote on the agenda, and you can raise those same issues with staff after this meeting or prior to Monday. But
yes, yes.
Okay.
I have a concern about how do we regulate this when it just goes to the permitting process. How do we alert residents that these ADUs are now, if we approve it, are available? And what do we do when there are known cases of accessory dwellings that are not in compliance with this ordinance? For instance, I do know of a homeowner that has a trailer that's been used by their son, and it's parked in there. They made a very lovely site for it, and it has water and electricity there. But in this ordinance, that wouldn't be allowed. I don't believe that's allowed now, but I'm not so sure. But a trailer like a FEMA trailer, that's parked and people are using it as an accessory dwelling. What do we need to do to get them in compliance? Or if they're out of compliance, how do we plan to promote this so that people don't assume that they can do that in their yard? Just put a trailer there. So,
Mr. Murphy and Ms. Crum, excuse me, Councilmember McIntosh, can I borrow 10 minutes or 5 minutes of your meeting?
If it was on any other item than this, I would say no. But on this one, take all the time you need.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Murphy and Ms. Crum, continue, please.
Councilmember Scipio, to answer your question, enforcement is just that. We would, if something is brought to our attention, we would, do an investigation. If we found that if the property was out of compliance with the provisions, that if council chooses to adopt these, if they were out of compliance with these provisions, then we would cite them and work to get them into compliance. Based on what you said earlier related to the existing situation that you're talking about, then, again, if you have an address, if you'll shoot me an email, we'll be glad to look into that to determine whether or not, that sounds like that may already be a violation, but we can certainly look into that and are happy to do so.
How do we plan to promote this to the public so that they know that this is now a tool that can be used?
You know, that's a great question. It's really not anything that we've thought about at this point because we haven't gotten to the finish line yet. But, you know, once, you know, when and if this is adopted, we could always work with marketing and communications to get information out on social media, perhaps do, you know, one of their little spots on TV 13, et cetera. Ed and his staff are always have great ideas that, you know, us lay people don't even think about as far as getting the word out. So we would certainly, if it's the council's desire, reach out to marketing and communications and work with them to get the word out.
Thank you. We had another agenda item, but I'm going to move that if it's okay with the attorney and Mr. Garrity. I'm going to move that to the meeting in January. And who was that?
Mr. Clark.
Councilmember Clark, and then Councilmember Larson.
I was going to make a motion if you would like one at this point.
I would love to have a motion.
I move that we forward this item to the entire council.
Second, Mundy.
The motion has been presented by Councilmember Clark that we forward this to council.
Is it being
Are you saying forward it to council without a vote, or the committee's going to vote?
Committee's going to vote, but I'm not offering a recommendation. It's just simply we forward it to the council for their vote in January.
Is that your motion, Mr. Clark, Councilmember Clark?
All the time, move it without recommendation. There seems to be some questions that gives us opportunities to get those questions answered, but I think we need to move this to the January 3rd meeting. So I make a motion that we move it without recommendation. We've done it dozens of times.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Attorney Carmen.
Yes, the committee has moved items before the city council without a recommendation. I was just trying to get a clarity as to what the motion was.
Yeah, that's what I was doing. I apologize. It has been moved and seconded by Councilmember Clark and Councilmember Mundy that we move this item G5 to council for Monday without a recommendation. I mean, next month, January, without a recommendation. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes.
Councilmember Mundy.
Aye.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember or MPT Adams.
Yes. Thank you all so much for such a spirited conversation. I want to thank the staff and everybody that's been involved for years trying to get this here at this point. As was said, it's not like people are running and breaking down the door to build an ADU in their backyard. It's not like they're moving mobile units to their backyards. But as Councilmember Clark said, what it does is gives us an opportunity to have another tool in the toolbox. It's not the silver bullet. Yeah. And as we move forward towards our housing summit in February, hopefully, we will be able to understand how you have to have all kinds of tools in your toolbox if you're going to make any indentation in this housing. I am going to ask the committee to hold and again move item G6 as well to my January meeting as well. Dr. Abraha, Winston-Salem Foundation folks, I apologize, but hopefully we'll be able to get it, whereas because this needs to be done again in helping stage the education of the community and the council and staff as to how Winston-Salem got where it is with the housing crunch and where we are now. Are there any other comments or anything? I want to wish everybody a happy holidays, Merry Christmas and all of that. Councilmember Clark.
Just real quick, I got to tell this story. I went to see a couple. She wanted to build an accessory dwelling for her mother, and leaving, the husband grabbed me and says he really didn't want his mother-in-law moving in. Is anything I could do, he'd appreciate it. So there's always a second opinion. And
I know.
They never built the addition.
Thank you for ending us on a light note, Councilmember Larson.
Bye-bye.
The councilman, okay?
Yeah, I'm done.
Public Works will start at 6:15.
Thank you, Councilman McIntosh. General government is adjourned.